Today, we're thrilled to welcome Alex Gray, Deputy Director for External Affairs at Energy UK, with a background spanning roles in Parliament and at one of the UK's leading energy utilities. Alex works at the intersection of energy and policy, helping shape strategies to drive the transition to net zero.
Welcome to Next Time Around, brought to you by Powerverse, the podcast where we take on the big questions of the green transition and explore how the world is changing for a cleaner, brighter future. We're your hosts, Lauren Forster
And Richard Britton.
And we'll be diving into the tech, the policies and the big ideas that are reshaping industries and people's lives. Whether it's cutting-edge technology or shifting priorities, we're here to figure out what it all means for you and the world that we're building for tomorrow. So get ready as we take a fresh look at how changes today are laying the groundwork for a better next time around.
Thanks for joining us on Next Time Around, Alex.
Thanks so much for having me.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation today. I feel it's such a good time to have you on. So could you tell us a little bit about your background and how you've got to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my background is pretty political. So I studied that at university. I spent a little bit of time as an elected councillor, actually, where I live in Hampshire. Found my way through some time in the Marines to a role in Parliament, where I was there during the Theresa May government. Brexit had just been voted on. It was a tricky time trying to get anything through in Parliament, but seeing that sort of inner workings, how bills become law, really sort of kept my passion for politics. So I did a couple of years there and then actually found myself accidentally in the energy sector, having got a job at EDF in their corporate affairs team there, which was just a fascinating business and a fascinating role to be in. You're sort of that bridge between business and the investment side of things with the customers that EDF had at the time, and using my skills, experience of applying political insight in what is a very highly regulated sector within the energy industry to that role. So at the time, I was involved with Hinkley Point C, the nuclear power station that's being built down in Somerset. Absolutely fascinating project. Some of the renewables business, the customer side of things, and early days of Sizewell C as well. So I left there and joined Energy UK about 3 and a bit years ago, where, I'm now Deputy Director for External Affairs, so very much involved on the communications side of the Energy Trade Association.
Exciting stuff. Maybe for our listeners, you can tell us what the mission of Energy UK is and a bit more about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Energy UK is the main trade association for the energy sector. So we have all the kind of household names that you would have thought of, some of the world's largest energy companies actually in the membership, right through to growing startups. We've got consultancies as well in membership, about 140 or so. Between them all, they're responsible for generating around 90% of the country's energy, supplying around 95% of the country's homes. And technology-wise, we cover almost everything apart from upstream oil and gas and some more niche bits of the network. So the role of the Energy Trade Association really is to represent the members. We're quite unique in that we can see how an electron is generated from a wind turbine up in the North Sea, how it's then transported through the wires of the grid and then ends up in the room that we're in, your homes, and how much it costs you to turn the heating and the lights on as well. So we see that we give we're there to provide that unique, that balanced view of energy is all about trade-offs, and one bit that you affect upstream somewhere will impact downstream. So that could be you increase a cost on some technology in generating electricity, it will end up on a bill somewhere. So we kind of see that whole picture. It's quite often why we're a critical friend of government, because we represent the interests of business, but hopefully we can help both sides achieve what they want, and also in the interests of households and businesses.
Yeah. I love how you described the impact of that, because you don't really think about that when you're a bill payer, of that impacting the cost of what you're paying every month. And ultimately, it's very topical. Everyone is complaining about how expensive it is at the moment to pay their bills. So how can we make sure that we're reducing those? So are you able to give an example of like the types of projects that you work on to help influence that and bring the prices down?
Yeah. I mean, firstly, I should say everybody's absolutely right to be worried about bills. We have a really significant growing debt problem for households as well. It was there pre-energy crisis, so late 21, 2022, but it's really skyrocketed since then. And while there's some relative comfort around the energy bills are pretty stable at the moment, they're still around 40% higher than what they were a few years ago. And there's no real sign of them coming down either. Gas prices are pretty stable. They're much higher than pre-crisis. But now the argument's kind of looking at what else is being added to the energy bill. So lots of things are being added through government choices to incentivize the building out of the network, to support renewable energy, to support Sizewell C that's coming online, energy efficiency programs, all stuff that we need to build and we need to upgrade. But there's a choice there for the government of where it's been landed. And to date, well, until some things yesterday, we're filming the day after the budget, it's landed on bills. So we kind of see a lot of what we call for through the prism of bills. So we see that huge debt problem. There are about 6 million households in fuel poverty. If you look at that as the effect, then we kind of work back from that and say, well, what can we do to address the cause? For us, the long-term goal is ultimately building more power here in Britain, being more reliant on the sources that we have. We are currently around 30% of our energy and electricity comes from gas, with a diminishing role of the North Sea, regardless of new exploration licenses. It is just a finite fuel, and we have about 25 years or so left of what is currently there. So for us, it's about building out much more of the clean power that we need here. Offshore wind is going to do much of the heavy lifting in the UK. We're an incredibly windy place. The North Sea, I think, is about 60 meters deep on average. It's just a great place to build. So we spent a lot of time talking about the renewables rollout, what's the best way, which also provides the most value for customers and households. So we're not overpaying, but we want to make sure that we can do this in the fastest possible way. But some of the other technologies as well that we're building out, so there's been some really good progress on nuclear power. Batteries is a really exciting place that we'll see over the coming years. So yeah, we will see. But in all of this as well, we need to think really carefully about the role of gas. It's had a pretty bad rep over the last couple of years, not unfairly. Prices during the crisis were about 25 times higher than what they would have usually been. The government had to step in with a £40 billion package of support, which is about the equivalent budget of the Home Office, to put that in perspective. So there was a significant intervention. It was a 1 in 25 year occurrence, but there's no guarantee that won't happen in the future years. So for us, that sort of forward look, building out as much clean British power as possible in the fairest way to households and businesses is kind of what we do day to day.
We talked about it in our season 1, episode 1, I think, about obviously Britain becoming a clean energy superpower. Yeah. I actually haven't heard that word floated for a long time.
Yeah.
But ultimately, that's what we need to become, that generating that independence.
Yeah. It's a real thing. Just because gas prices are pretty stable at the moment, we largely get a lot of our LNG or gas from friends, from allies, in Norway, the US, Qatar, Australia, but any sort of economic impact, any sort of geopolitical event, you can see it sometimes. I mean, it was more sensitive, obviously, during the energy crisis, but there was one day in particular where even a proposed strike at a gas refinery in Australia sent the overnight gas price up 7%. And the strike didn't even happen. With increasing tensions around the Straits of Hormuz, that sort of thing, you can see gas prices becoming very volatile. So while they're stable right now, there's no guarantee that it wouldn't happen in the future.
And how do you see the organizations that you represent responding to some of the timing necessities on this? I mean, you've got a military background yourself. You talk about the energy crisis being a 1 in 25 year episode, and yet we're in an increasingly unstable environment, and there's the chances of these things happening more frequently, I guess, is on the increase.
Potentially, yeah. I mean, you just can't rule it out. So, yeah, I mean, for the sector, the government's ambition You can debate whether it's achievable or not. It's Herculean, I think, is the word that's often thrown around everything needs to fall into place and it needs to be really quickly, it needs to be perfect. But stepping back, the confidence that gives investors and the markets and the companies doing this, because to build an offshore wind turbine, for instance, it's billions of pounds that quite often you will need to raise from the people not too far down the road from here. Having that government direction is just critically important. So for the members that we represent, and it is nearly all offshore wind developers, but of many other technologies as well, they see this as an absolute flat out, actually, there are various regulatory problems that are getting in the way. It's not really the capital, it's not the appetite, it's we want to build now, or we can't get a planning application, we can't get a grid connection for a couple of years.
Right.
We really need to get this built. But there's just more and more coming on the system. So there's more demand for electricity to generate it, but you look at the queue to connect for the things that are going to actually absorb this electricity, so data centers, industrial, various businesses around industrial clusters, gigafactories to build the EVs, housing, estates. If people are going to be moving to EVs, to heat pumps, there's just going to be a hell of a lot more electricity. And so that's the real kind of race to get all of that passed as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that obviously you have 140 plus members. That's a lot of competing opinions, a lot of opinions.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of manage that negotiation between taking the right thing to Parliament and advising on that?
It's a really good question. We're fortunate that we have very strict governance structures. We have an excellent board that is made up of many of our largest members. They are there as non-exec directors, so they are able to see the organisation for what it is. So the way that we try to structure it is we need to be the most effective trade association for the industry. We need to be able to take bold positions. Sometimes that might mean slightly disagreeing with the company objectives of one of our members. But I mean, it's very, very rare that we would ever kind of put something out that we don't, or many of the members don't agree with. We wouldn't be very effective if we did that. We're quite often seen, because we have those competing interests, actually, that's what gives us that credibility, because we can see the whole industry. So it's not quite one self-interested group. We can say to government quite regularly, or in the media, this bit of the industry will be a bit unhappy if you do this. This bit will really like it. Here's the kind of way through. So we'll quite often suggest that as well.
Yeah, that's
but it's tricky.
Yeah,
at times anyway.
I think it would be really interesting to explore, like, generally, what are the things that, you talked about infrastructure being a problem and regulation, but like, what are the things that we need to do to make sure that we can achieve the targets in the future?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch of things. The regulation piece is a major one, and that's everything from the regulator itself. There are 10,000 pages of supply code. It's something like 12 times the length of Shakespeare's complete works. If you wanted to become a retail supplier, that's your Bible that you have to make sure you're adhering to at all times. So there is the regulation piece. I mean, there's a more philosophical argument for the energy sector of kind of, what do you want it to be? Do you want it to be a highly regulated utility sector, or do you want it to operate as a private market? Particularly for the retail bit of the market, we kind of walk this middle ground between being incredibly regulated, but also expected to operate like a private enterprise. And it's hard to do both. So there is a regulation piece, and that comes down to the connections queue as well. And frankly, it's been very, very slow to catch up with the amount of supply and demand that wants to come onto the grid. We've been a little bit of a victim of our own success, that the renewables industry in this country in particular has really taken off. Solar farms, battery developers, they're all joining the queue, and now all the data centers are coming through, and other people who want to access that electricity. The queue used to operate like just a taxi rank, frankly, so first come, first serve. So that's being addressed, but all of it comes down to bills, we think. And too much of the network, the policy, the environmental levies have been added to the cost of electricity. We think that by reducing the cost of electricity, you then unlock a whole plethora of benefits. So people looking to get a heat pump suddenly work out that, well, I could probably save a couple of £100 a year by getting a heat pump now, because they're much more efficient than my gas boiler. But as things stand, electricity is 4 times plus more expensive than gas. So that's the kind of the household level, which would then unlock a whole bunch of supply chain benefits as well, would drive more supply. So we would get more electricity coming onto the system. But for businesses, and the government talks about economic growth, we have the highest industrial energy prices in the world. If you're a heavy user of electricity, you're getting some support from the government at the moment, but I think it's about to go out to about 8,000 companies or so. About 98% of the UK's companies are SMEs, which are getting no support at the moment, but still facing these incredibly high costs. So if you want to achieve that economic growth on top of the staffing costs that you might have, business rates, etc., your energy bill is a pretty significant cost. And that really came to the fore around the energy crisis, where suddenly we had to go and talk to the rest of the economy and explain this is how the energy sector works, because you just didn't really have to worry until the energy crisis. Energy was, unless you were a steel manufacturer or really, really heavy industrial user, it wasn't something you really had to think about. And then over the space of about 9 months, energy costs became a kind of board level decision and interest. So reducing the price of electricity is absolutely key, and everything kind of falls underneath that.
Like any market, it's going to be driven by confidence, really, isn't it? And there's confidence operating at all sorts of levels. There's the consumers and their hesitancy to adopt heat pumps in case it's more expensive. There's businesses and their hesitancy to invest in new infrastructure because there's a higher cost of the energy flowing into that. And then there is the supply side and its reliance, saying money's not a problem, but it's whether or not the government are going to do the right things. And the government have got this Herculean task. If you were trying to kind of pick a thread through that and where the confidence comes from, what message could the government be sending out? What could the suppliers be doing differently to start to create a greater level of confidence and get the flywheel moving?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think because energy is so regulated, it is so linked to government targets, government ambitions. You've got individual companies building the stuff that the entire country needs. So the government plays that really important role of joining up. We're going to have big industrial demand around the Humber, right? We need to think about how we power that. If you're an individual generator, you can't really make that decision or play that sort of coordinated role. So the government and its ambitions really is absolutely fundamental. I mean, what knocks investor confidence more than anything is kind of chopping and changing of programs, chopping and changing of budgets, political consensus, which is breaking down a little bit at the moment about the trajectory of where we're going towards what we'll need for our energy. The race is on for this, really. You see countries around the world, China potentially becoming the first major electro-state. The dominance that China has around the supply chain around electric vehicles, wind turbines, solar panels, nuclear power. Yes, it's building coal, but it also sees renewable energy as one of the main drivers of economic growth within the country, and also a huge export opportunity. So China this year alone is building more renewable electricity in the country than the entire demand of the UK and Germany put together. So it's absolutely significant. Yeah. Europe is doing this as well. Other countries around the world, the US less so now, but there's not to say that it wouldn't come back. If you're an investor, you've got mobile capital, you're looking to say, right, well, where's the most stable regime, and also where am I going to make my highest return, but also the quickest. And the UK traditionally is that place. Our offshore wind sector we have the 5 largest wind farms in the world here. It's a real success story. But they're now competing, those same global investors. So that stability piece, and we hold the government to account. We're very noisy sometimes when we don't like what the government is doing, but we'll give them credit for the energy mission they've set out. It's punchy. The sector is behind it. It's now about the regulatory piece, making sure that we stick the path. The chopping and changing, it's unhelpful.
And I guess you can track a lot of it against, and it is the bills, but it's the sort of price per kilowatt hour. And we've all watched with interest over the last decade as the price of solar has come down and down and down, and wind has come down and down and down as well. But on the other side of that argument, there are, the large hydrocarbon generators who have a lobby who are interested in seeing a continuation of the same kind of consumption that's happening in the homes. So my question is, do you think that renewables are at a point where they absolutely do stand on their own 2 feet versus hydrocarbon power, or do you think that there's still a debate to be had in industry and government on that?
Yeah, again, it's a good question. I think we're in a different place now as well. We're post the peak of the energy crisis. The wholesale price of gas is still 40% or so, at the time of filming, than what it was pre-crisis. It's not one or the other, really. I think that it's a very easy criticism because the cost of renewables have gone up. The cost of almost every infrastructure project has gone up, and that includes the cost of building new or refurbishing gas power stations as well. If you wanted to build a gas power station tomorrow, it would probably cost you about 3 times what the last one cost. And if you want a turbine, go and speak to any of the OEMs, they'll probably give you a 3+ year waiting list to get one, let alone your grid connection. So this is what I'm saying is there's just a global wake up to having more secure energy powered within your own country. And every major economy really is looking at this and saying, we want some of that. So there's just a global competition for a bit of everything.
That puts it in good context back to the confidence point, which is confidence comes down to energy security, local production of energy. Not every country has its own hydrocarbon reserves, and so renewables, for reasons other than carbon efficiency, are becoming popular everywhere, and that's ultimately the thing that's going to be driving government agendas, which is that independence and security.
Yeah. And it depends on your approach to these sorts of things as well, and maybe more of your political leaning. How much do you view a sort of top-down approach to this? We represent business, and we think if you want an EV, you should get one because it's really cheap to run. Yes, the upfront costs at the moment might be a little bit more than a petrol and diesel car, but barely anything it costs to service it. There are very few parts compared to a petrol car. Same with a heat pump. You should not be told to get a heat pump because it's the right thing to do. You should get one because it's going to make your house really nice and warm, and you're probably going to save a fortune. So the market approach is something that we view on it, but we're in that transition. We really are. The last 20, 30 years or so, it's all been about behind the meter, we call it, where it's largely the power sector has been massively decarbonised. So coal came off the system for the first time last September. Coal's history in the UK is seriously impressive. We were the first major economy to take it off. Wind and renewables are now powering about 50% of our electricity. So we've made huge strides. And now the next step is about the boilers, the heat pumps, the energy efficiency, the EVs, business decarbonisation as well, which is just a huge bit of the sector that we barely scratched.
I think you mentioned earlier about investor confidence, but I guess another element to it is consumer confidence as well. Yep. So the media, love it, hate it. It spins a narrative which can be quite negative, even though things are being done to obviously improve this sector. How do you think that plays into the journey that we're on?
It's not helpful, but we live in a democracy, and the media is quite right to point things out and make a story of how it wishes. The confidence piece, particularly on the consumer side of things, it's largely been the chopping and changing of government programs. So, my limited energy career anyway, I think there have been 3 or 4 home decarbonisation schemes that have kind of risen up and then just been stopped at a moment's notice. So there are 2 main problems there. That the consumer sees that as, I might do it. I've just got, I'm going on holiday, or I've got this thing to do first. I'll get round to it at some point, and then the scheme closes. The second thing is around the supply chain impacts there. And if you're a business, or maybe you work for yourself, you wanted to sign up and install some energy efficiency because of the government scheme, you're going to get a bit of subsidy. Are you really going to spend time and money training up people? Or if you're a manufacturer, investing in parts and the process that it takes to manufacture something for the government to then pull the demand side of it as well. So it's not helpful. Our advice to government has always been, if you're going to do this, just stick the path. The first year might be tricky, but it will roll out. You just need to be confident that it will happen.
That reminds me of something that one of my customers was talking to me about this week, and they're an OEM and they're in the electric vehicle charging space, and they were talking about their concerns over the government introducing regulation that requires electricians to have an additional specific qualification in order to install an electric vehicle charger or a heat pump or in solar and battery, which is maybe more understandable. Most of the Sparkies I speak to say putting an EV charger, whilst it's manual physical work, from an electrical perspective is relatively straightforward, but they're now going to have to take 2 days off the tools and spend £500 to get the certificate to be able to do that. That sounds like an example of something which the industry is not that keen on, but the government are doing sort of in spite of that. What do you think about that?
Yes, there are all sorts of quirks, if you can put it that way.
Yeah.
If you're going to set targets and encourage people to take up whatever technology it might be in their home, and the disruption that comes with that, we need to be honest about it. I'm in the process of looking at getting a heat pump at the moment in my house. It's not going to be appropriate. Actually, I live in an older house, a little bit too close to my neighbor. It fails the sound test by a couple of decibels. So I'm not going to be able to get one, but there's all sorts of like weird regulation around that, the cost to requalify. It all just needs to be looked at. And a lot of it's kind of coming up now because we're really doing this stuff. EV sales, going back to media narrative, will tell you, they're not really doing very well at the moment. They really are. About 1 in 5 cars as an EV. And soon you'll start to see that secondhand market coming through. There's chicken and egg around the charging infrastructure that's being rolled out. That then comes back to a grid connection. Can you get enough electricity as well? But it is happening. So these quirks that come around requalifying, that is a significant problem. The people that are actually on the ground doing this sort of thing, they need to be brought alongside this a lot faster.
Yeah.
Yes.
We also, when we, PowerVest actually started out D2C, direct to consumer. And one of the challenges at one point was we couldn't get chargers installed fast enough because there was a severe lack of qualified installers out there. And I know that was a challenge shared by many. Yeah, so it's actually how can you get the right people in the right places as well, fast enough to make sure that we're moving at the right pace.
Yeah. The workforce challenge of this is going to be absolutely huge as well. Huge opportunities, but a challenge. Just one thing with the boiler workforce, I think more than 50% of the workforce is going to retire in the next 10 years. So you think about how do you get the new generation of people coming through that are going to be installing either boilers, heat pumps, or other technologies in homes? Or how do you retrain those that maybe 10 years from retiring? How can you? Would it be financially attractive for them to do so? They've been installing boilers or maybe technology before that all their life. The people element is absolutely huge, and that's just on that one technology, let alone building some of the other bigger bits of kit. I think down at Hinkley Point C at the moment, there's about 10,000 people on site. Sizewell C is probably going to be similar in that. So then you've got the wind sectors, the solar sectors, all the other technologies that go with it. The grid is absolutely huge. I think it's around 700,000 jobs or something that need to be created over the next 4 or 5 years.
It's a good news story for jobs.
It's great, as long as you're one of those as well. It comes back to the fairness point around the transition, the hydrocarbons aspect that you mentioned. A lot of the North Sea has powered the UK for the last few decades. We've exported jobs around the world. You go to parts of Africa, Asia, where there is drilling going on. You'll quite often hear a British accent. We were really, really good at this. But that is coming to the end of its life in the coming decades. It will play gas, especially, and oil will play a vital role. But those jobs that are so concentrated, particularly along the northeast coast and up to Aberdeen, we need to be really thinking about that transition now. Because yes, 700,000 jobs is really, really exciting. There's a whole new generation of people coming through, but there's also a lot of jobs going out in the North Sea at the moment, and we really need to be thinking about those people.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I think the big topic of the moment is obviously the autumn budget. My LinkedIn feed is flooded with people's opinions on it, but I'd love to get yours on what your thoughts are on the announcements.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's very positive. We have to welcome it. The major things that we saw yesterday from the Chancellor's announcements were £150 off energy bills, which is not to be sniffed at. What the Chancellor has done is take a particular policy cost off the bill and move it into general taxation, which is something that Energy UK and many in the energy industry and fuel poverty charities and wider charities that we work with have called for some time. It goes back to the point around successive governments using the energy bill as a bit of a credit card and just loading on these costs. And we're at that stage now where gas prices, which make up the bulk of the bill, are pretty steady. But these additional costs that the governments have chosen to add are adding to bills. So seeing those moved into general taxation is really welcome. It's the first time that we think the government has kind of seen that and admitted it. So that's, really, really positive. The Chancellor announced the £150 saving. So to come in for April. So we assume April's price cap should come in around the 1st. That was due to have around £80 or so of network and policy costs added to it. So the net saving amongst all the kind of political spin might be around £80 or so, maybe a little bit less. So if you work that out over 12 months, it's not a massive saving, £5 to £6 a month or so off your energy bill. So there is a bigger question to come of £150 is a big number. It's a nice headline. Will it be enough politically or in the media? And will it actually be enough with energy bills of what they are? They're not forecast to come down drastically over the coming year or so. Will that £150 be enough? We don't know. There's plenty more that governments could take off the bill that the government is in control of. And it comes back to the debt problem that we see only growing. So it's at about 4.5 billion or so amongst households that are in arrears, so have no ability to pay. When you work that out per household, it's about £3,000 that they're in debt to their energy supplier. That's the level of debt where you just think, how do you even start?
It's unbelievable, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's a huge number.
And it's climbing, really climbing.
Yeah.
The trajectory is scary.
Terrible.
The official figure is about 4.5 billion. It's probably more than that right now because it's a retrospective figure. There are some analysts out there that could think it could be 6 billion next year. It's frightening, and that you think that's just your energy bill, let alone your council tax, where you might be falling behind on that. Your broadband, trying to wash your children's clothes before they go to school the next day if they come back muddy. There's sort of real life things that is impacting people. So, it's part of the passionate bit about this job as well, is that you see yourself really making that impact. What was announced yesterday, moving some of the costs off the bill and reducing energy bills, has kind of been our number one thing for the year. And going back a bit further than that, so we want to see further action on that. It's the energy is a kind of weird space where you work really closely with fuel poverty campaigners and charities and trade unions and investors and developers and there's the people that you probably wouldn't find in the room all agreeing on the same thing in many other sectors. Everyone's sort of working towards the same goal. So we hope to see more action in the next year or so. But it's welcome what's announced yesterday.
Definitely a step in the right direction,
100%.
isn't it? Yeah. And then I think what I've seen online is obviously a lot around, there are some things that they've announced where it's really like helping make a step forward in the move to electrification. But equally, they've announced this new tax on electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids as well. So do you have any thoughts on those?
Yeah, it's a tricky one because the Treasury has to look at doing something around fuel duty income and some of the taxes that it currently collects from internal combustion engines cars. The Treasury says it's still going to work out cheaper, the kind of pay per mile idea for EVs. I haven't done the sums. I don't know. I have to take them at their word for it. But what's really important is not to provide a disincentive to say to drivers, look, you can get a grant for your EV, for charge point operators. Some of the changes around business rates are really positive. The important thing is how it's then implemented and not to make it unattractive to EV drivers. So we'll see, how exactly they'll measure the pay per mile, I think is still up for debate. Media around this morning, I'm not sure it was really kind of pinned down on how exactly it'll be measured. Then there's the question around kind of how is it measured? Is it a sort of tracking device in your car? I'm not sure that's the best thing that drivers would want for their EV. So it's a delicate time because the Treasury needs to come up with some mechanism to start to recoup some of the cost for these additional cars that will be coming on the road. But we need to make sure it's really important that the rollout continues.
Yeah, it's about supporting it, isn't it? Rather than trying to prevent it.
Yeah. It has to be the direction, and look at the jobs, kind of back up the supply chain as well, and supporting companies like Jaguar Land Rover and what they do in the local area and the investment that kind of goes into that. It's through the whole supply chain that they need to make sure that it works.
And any thoughts on the Warm Homes Plan, the 1.5 billion made available to heat people's homes?
Yeah, so that was the less good bit of the budget. Not the 1.5 billion itself, but the scrapping of the energy company obligations at ECO, which has really been the main mechanism over the last few years of getting solar panels, energy efficiency, heat pumps into some of the most vulnerable people's homes in the country. You can make an argument around how effective it is as a scheme. The reality is it is delivering. So what's to come, really, we will wait and see. Again, comes back to that confidence piece, both with the consumer to trust what is going to be installed in their house. Solar panels are disruptive. You need to make sure that what you're having is installed is good quality, and the supply chain impact. So the 1.5 billion is a big number. It's not quite what was expected for ECO over the next few years. ECO is currently about 1.5 billion a year. So this is 1.5 billion over the rest of the Parliament. So we will see. Devil's in the detail.
Yeah, it's really interesting and clearly so much still to do. So for our final question, Alex, what do you think is needed to deliver the long-term energy security for this country?
You're not going to like this because it's a whole bunch of everything. And it really is. It sounds a spin line, but reducing ourselves from that global volatility around gas prices. We sometimes have short memories, and it really was only 3 years ago that if you were buying the equivalent price of what the gas price did and you were buying a pint would be about 25 quid or so. Government spending 40 billion to subsidise every single household's energy bills in the country. We have to move to a place where we are just less exposed to that sort of thing. So starting right up the top, we need to make sure that we've got the financiers, the investors here that see the energy transition as attractive and you can make healthy returns. And so they should, for investing billions in this country. Right through the developers, they need to be able to build stuff really quickly, to upgrading the grid, which whether we're doing the energy transition or not, we would still need to upgrade a lot of the grids. You think about what's coming on to sort of power the economy of the future. I'm sure you use it. I use ChatGPT, Gemini all the time. It's about 7 times the energy usage of that compared to a Google search. It takes a lot of energy. We need to make sure that we can upgrade the grid to get all of that. But then we've got to reduce bills for people and we've got to bring it along. And all of that is connected. If people don't see the energy transition working for themselves, if they don't see cheaper bills, if they don't have warmer homes, if the new technologies coming through are costing them more, but they feel they've been forced to do this by a company or by the government, that has a massive knock-on effect all the way back through the network. So it is a hell of a lot of absolutely everything, and we just need to throw everything at it.
Good answer. Thank you.
Everything.
I'm afraid.
Well, thank you so much for being on Next Time Round.
You're
We've
welcome.
absolutely loved talking to you today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thanks, Alex.
Thanks.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to follow us on LinkedIn by searching Powerverse or share it with someone who might find it helpful. To find out more about our software, visit our website www.powerverse.com. Thanks for listening to Next Time Around. Until next time.